Welcome everyone to another edition of the Ohio Guys here on location at Godaiku-Con in Dearborn, Michigan, and I'm here with none other than Greg Ayers. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Having a good, nice, chill weekend.
Oh yeah, man, it's been way chill.
Yeah.
It's like we don't get cons that often like that.
Yeah, I'm on a streak of 9 conventions back to back, so this is week 5 of 9. So I was excited to have a little chill weekend. Next weekend I'm going to be at Otakon, which is going to be a madhouse. So I'm enjoying a chill weekend where I can just, kind of take it easy.
Oh yeah, definitely. Calm before the storm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. But now we have some questions we would like to ask you for our viewers. What was it like working on Baka and Test?
Baka and Test is fun. I find myself playing a lot of supporting roles, and I find that those roles are usually funnier than other roles. My little guy in Baka and Test is a little pervert that's always taking pictures that he's not supposed to be. And I had fun working on it just because I like that form of comedy, and I really like that style of animation with with realistic yet all the super deformed characters. So or chibi characters. Somebody said super deformed is not a word we're allowed to use anymore. Anyway, chibi. But the funniest thing about working on the show, I ended up having dinner with one of the writers. We were myself, Josh Greeley, and a few other people, and Nabashin, and one of the writers for Baka and Test. But none of us, Josh and I didn't speak Japanese, and she didn't speak English. And so after a long, kind of awkward, just sitting and eating our food and looking at each other, she knew we had worked on Baka and Test, and she, very quietly, she goes, Bakugou and Test. I go, and she was like, oh. So I love that I have a character that I don't even have to say his name. I can just go, and the writer knew. And then we laughed, and then we tried to communicate with like little facial things, but it didn't work. But it was fun. I got my word across, but it was fun. It's a funny show. There's so many people that ask, will there ever be more? And the answer is, I hope so. But only Japan can dictate that. So, but it's fun. It's always a fun show to go back and watch too.
Yeah, another classic show that you worked on. What was it like working on Chrono Crusade?
Oh, that's one of my all-time favorites. Again, weirdly enough, just like this story about Baka and Test. Only I met the creator of Chrono Crusade. I met the mangaka for Chrono Crusade, and I guess we were about halfway through recording it. So it really it moved him to see that someone that was working on the show was so infatuated with it and like couldn't stop talking about it. He was really loved the fact that I was as into the show as I was. And it meant more to me going back and working on the show because I met the person whose job it was to create the show to begin with, and all the obstacles he had to overcome just to even get that manga published. And then knowing I knew that the ending was going to be sad, and I asked him something about it, and he goes, well, I wrote both endings, and they're both sad. So that meeting with Moriyama changed how I felt about the manga versus anime argument, because people always say, oh, the manga's better, oh, the anime's better. Sometimes they're different just because they want you to do both, so yeah, Chrono Crusade's always going to be a real special show to me. When we lost Sai Yuki to the California cast for Reload and Gunlock, I remember Matt Greenfield telling me, well, there's probably a new little guy that you'll get to voice that you'll like just as much as that guy. And it was funny because now that I look back on it, I'm pretty sure he was talking about Chrono. And that really was a nice role to step into in the absence of Goku. So, yeah, I love that show. It'll always be one of my favorites. Yeah, I'm really glad for the re-release, too, because there's a whole new generation of fans that get to see it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was a classic that, wow.
It came out a while ago, too.
Yeah, I'd say about 10, 12 years, I think.
Yeah, about 11 years old, yeah.
Yeah, and for another show that has been picking up a lot of steam in the anime community, what was it like working on From the New World?
Oh, I love that show just because I don't think there's many shows written as well as that show. And I know part of it's because it's based on a Korean novel, and so it was a much better fleshed out story to begin with. But just the story itself and the journey that you take with these characters is so amazing. It's also got some pretty stark social commentary if you look between the lines. But yeah, it's neat. I was just joking about the fact that one of the hardest roles I've ever had to play is at the end of that show being 30 something, which is funny because I'm in my 40s. but somebody said, well, do you think you can do the 6-year-old? I was like, oh, I can do the 6-year-old. I don't know about the 36-year-old. But I really I loved the way the show turned out, and somebody actually brought to one of the conventions. They had a Paul Champagne box commissioned, like the old champagne boxes they used to do for. Yeah, so he had contacted somebody and gotten through and had a Paul Champagne box created from the New World, and I was like, wow, I want that box. So yeah, but it's a fantastic show, really good show.
Oh yeah. Another fun show that I've seen is what was it like working on Kokoro Connect?
Kokoro Connect is one of those weird shows because we were doing a whole lot of key animation stuff at the time. So anytime I walk into a show like that, I'm like, okay, somebody's gonna die. But that show had such a weird storyline between us changing bodies with each other and voices and ages and all that. And Matrenga's character is one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite things I've seen him do in a while. It was just a weird story. I think that was the most appealing to me. It's not like most of those slice of life shows. It's funny. It's listed in the top 10 slice of life shows, but it's really not. The things that happen to them are not very slice of life. No. It's a very very magical, mystical tour. But yeah, I like the storyline on that as well. It's doing a Demon of the Week show or a fighter show. Those are fun and those are anime staples. But these shows that have like really interesting dialogue and really interesting storylines are really the shows we remember working on the most. So.
Oh, yeah. And also, what was it like performing on Danganronpa, the animation?
It was tough. It was tough to fill those shoes. The original voice actress for Monokuma in Japan is the lady that's the original voice of Doraemon. So, and several of the jokes in that show are based on things she did as Doraemon. So, when we went into it, both myself and Chris Bevins did not want to just copy her because it's not fair to her, and it was really her last big role. Mm-hmm. So we kind of wanted her performance to be her own performance, and that to be the only iteration of that sounded like that. So therefore, we had to come up with something brand new. And the funny thing is, I really thought I was going to end up playing Fujisaki in the show, just because I always play the little boy that looks like that, to not give anything away. But but the description for Monokuma said half Freddy Krueger, half Teddy Ruxpin. And I had a Teddy Ruxpin. And when the batteries start to go bad on those things, they start talking by themselves. And so I was like, oh, I have nightmares about Teddy Ruxpin. I can do this. So I really never thought I was going to end up playing Monokuma, but he's one of my favorite characters I've ever voiced. There's never been a bad guy that is so lovable. Like, you love it when he's awful, because that's what he is. He's just an awful, horrible bear, and you just love it. His puns and his little jokes. In the first episode where he says, well, it's really all about the kids, as he's walking out of the room, and I was like, oh, this character is awful. But so much fun. And I think the neat thing is when we did the last two seasons, a lot of people from the California cast were not able to do the original. Well, so we brought them in, Chris Bevins brought those actors in different roles in the second two seasons, and it was neat because they were still part of the universe, the Danganronpa universe, so it was cool.
And also for one of the biggest tearjerker shows, what was it like working on Clannad?
Oh, man, I was just telling somebody, one, again, I hate to keep saying the same thing, but one, fantastic story. But and going all the way back to the Baka and Test question, I play supporting roles a lot. And they're usually like little pervy guys or little hyper guys or little whiny guys. This guy was just obnoxious. When I started recording Sunohara, I was like, what an awful little kid. And he gets beat up all the time, and he should. And he's funny. I mean, he's funny in a weird kind of spazzy, like teenage way. But then when that story takes a turn for the dark, he's the only thing that can, keep you from just like picking your jaw up off the floor. Yeah. So I remember watching it the first time, and I was at one of the really, really awful scenes in the movie, and I was like, is Sunohara coming up soon? I was like, please, somebody send in that awful little kid. But it was a surprising thing. That was the first thing we produced for Sentai Filmworks as well. So it was nice to start off on that note, because Sentai has continued to go down that path of doing lesser tread, but deeper, storyline shows. So I think it was great. It was a great first title for Sentai Filmworks.
Yep, and for another show that's recently got their third season, what was it like performing in Food Wars?
Food porn. I mean, Food Wars. I love Food Wars. I never when I was thinking about Food Wars, I just always think of the older characters. So I didn't think there was any place for me in that show. I don't know how I could have forgotten Zenji and his OCD room. But the minute I found out I was playing him, I was like, oh, that's the kid whose room they keep screwing up. So I love it. It's almost a trope that I play. This little kid that freaks out. It's almost like a grown-up version of Tsuyoshi from Kodacha. But it's a fun show. And of course, I'm not involved in any of the oohs and ahs. I'm a little nerdy cooking student. But I'm super excited to be a part of it. It's just such a neat show, and it's got such a wild fan base. So, yeah, it's really cool. I was glad they finally announced it. We recorded it a little while ago, so I'm like, can I talk yet? So we're going to do an on-screen thing. They're doing it. They're going to show it at a movie theater pretty soon in Houston, so a bunch of us are all going to show up for that.
Yeah, and also a show that you've worked on. What was it like working on F, A Tale of Memories?
Oh, man. Another sad show. On those shows, it's weird because I like those shows. I like performing in shows like that. I like more subtle acting, and my Hiro Hirono is a pretty subtle little guy. But the performances I remember are like Lucy just murdered me in that show. The moment where she's calling, the screen's filling up with all the text, I was just like, oh my gosh. But I love that show because to be sad, there's so many uplifting points too. It's not just a show that's like, we're going to make you fall in love with these people and they're dead. It's not a typical punch in the gut. Yeah. It's a really fun show. Yeah.
And another show that's pretty underrated at times, what was it like working on Trinity Blood?
Oh man, my character in Trinity, I think it's funny that I can say I play the Pope in anything because I'm the most unlikely candidate for the Pope. But man, talk about a wimpy guy. And it's so funny because some actors hate playing wimpy characters. There's one, I won't name him, but there's one guy that just hates being thought of as the wimp. I love playing wimpy characters because there's no shortage of them in anime. But the Pope raised the bar on wimpy. That is the most crying, whining, sad little kid I've ever played. And I would just laugh. It was so pathetic at times. Mike McFarlane and I would just laugh. And I'm like, man, I'm going to have to go get in a bar fight after this. Like, I feel like a little kid. But it was a great show. The thing about Trinity Blood, and I'm my background, my degree is in marketing and advertising and art. The thing that I thought was so cool about Trinity Blood originally was that awesome box set they put out. Funimation put out probably that I think is my favorite box set ever produced. Okay. I think it's the most gorgeous collector's box I've ever seen.
I haven't seen the wall scrolls, and they're beautiful.
Oh, the art, and that's why it's so good that they took their time and did a lot of neat merchandising for the show. The art style of that show is gorgeous. Like, it's just gorgeous. So it's cool that they did the little cards, and they did the scroll. You can buy the scrolls. They did the collector's box. Really neat stuff. So yeah, I love that show for the look and the content. And I love Sabbath's character. Sabbath's character with the guns reminded me of the scene in Equilibrium. I almost think it had to have been a tip of the hat to that movie. But yeah, I love that show.
Yep, and for a show that was recently released, what was it like performing on Sai Yuki Reload Blast?
Man. That's tough. It's great to be back in that show. We did Sai Yuki in the first film, and that was 2 years of my life, and that was really the show that put me on the map. Like, that was my first big show. But then we lost, Reload and Reload Gunlock to California, and that was partly because it was a co-production with Dentsu, and so we got to go back and do Gaiden because there was no Jenny on at that point. Yeah. So we did Gaiden, and then Funimation was announced as getting it. And like, there's always this when a show goes to a different studio, but most all of us work for Funimation. Yeah. So we were like, okay, okay, I hope I get to work on this. And so going in the first time, it was funny. I haven't done that voice in a while, but it just came out of my mouth the minute I stepped in. It was just like I never stopped doing the role. It is quite a big commitment right now, though, because, like I said, I'm on this 9-con streak.
Oh, yeah.
Tuesday is my day that I record Sai Yuki. So I'll get home from a con sometimes at like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. I go right to bed, I wake up, and I drive straight to Dallas, which is 5 hours, record 4 hours, and then drive 5 hours to get back home. But there's some shows that you don't mind doing that for.
Yeah.
And I use it to, preview music for my raves and, kind of have some quiet time to myself. So the 10 hours in the car is not bad. I don't know if I'd do it for a little bitty role like that, but it's so great to be back in that show and to hear David and not everyone made it from the legacy cast, but David, there's a few new ones that I probably can't announce just yet, but David and Vic and I have all been announced, and there's some more surprises coming too, but it's neat to hear us alongside other voices from Funimation in new characters like Aaron Roberts' character. Monica has a new character that's pretty cool, because Monica played a lot of small characters in the original one, so it's kind of cool to see her in some other roles. Cough, cough.
Oh, yeah. Is there anything that's coming out very soon that you could plug in at this time?
Yeah. I was just announced in Space Patrol Luluco. I play a little crazy shark called Mach Speed. Food Wars, Sai Yuki Reload Blast. I was just announced in Chihaya Furu. I have a hard time saying that. I play Porky in that show. And then I've got some I hate doing this. I have some really big announcements coming up. But one I just got cast in, so it'll probably be a while before I can talk about that. But one of them will be premiering in a movie theater soon. So, and that's a big one. So next time I talk to you, I'll be able to tell you all about that.
Okay. All right, and thank you for tuning in to the Ohhara, guys, everyone. I'm David.
I'm Greg.
And thanks for tuning in, everyone. See you next time.